Look at your jaw. Right now, reach up and feel the edge of it. That angle, that width, that sharpness or softness under your fingers, that's not random. That's hundreds of thousands of years of human survival compressed into bone. And here's what most people never stop to consider. Your jawline isn't just a cosmetic feature, it's a structural record of what your ancestors ate, where they lived, and how their bodies adapted to survive environments that would kill most modern humans inside a week. Welcome to Health Exposed. Let's get into it. Your jaw is one of the most mechanically complex structures in your entire body. It's not just bone sitting there to give your face a shape. It's an engineering system. The mandible, the lower jawbone, is the only freely moving bone in your skull. It hinges, it rotates, it slides forward and sideways. It works in coordination with muscles, tendons, cartilage, and an intricate joint called the temporomandibular joint, or TMJ, that rivals the complexity of your knee. This structure has to handle chewing, breathing, swallowing, and speech simultaneously. And every one of those functions has left a mark on the shape you're walking around with today. But here's where it gets fascinating. The jaw you have right now is fundamentally different from the jaw your ancient ancestors carried. Not slightly different. Dramatically different, and understanding that gap tells you something profound about how human evolution actually works. Go back 200,000 years. The early Homo sapiens who were emerging in Africa were not eating soft bread and cooked pasta. They were eating raw tubers, tough dried meat, hard seeds, fibrous plant material, foods that required enormous bite force and sustained chewing. To handle that kind of mechanical load, their jaws were built accordingly. Larger, wider, thicker bones with more pronounced muscle attachment points. The masseter muscle, the primary chewing muscle that runs along the side of your jaw, was substantially larger and anchored to a broader, more robust facial structure. Jaw muscles were so powerful in some archaic human species that they had a bony ridge running along the top of the skull, called a sagittal crest, purely to anchor the muscle. Your skull doesn't have that. Your jaw muscles didn't need it. Even closer relatives, like the Neanderthals, had faces and jaws built for a completely different world. Their prognathic facial structure, meaning the face projected forward rather than sitting flat, was partly an adaptation to their environment and diet. Neanderthal fossils consistently show heavy wear patterns on their front teeth, suggesting they also used their jaws as a third hand, gripping hides and materials while working them. Their jaw was a tool as much as a digestive structure, and it looked the part. Thick, wide, forward projecting, with virtually no chin. That last part matters more than most people realize. The chin is yours. Specifically, it belongs to modern Homo sapiens and to no other species that has ever existed. No other primate has a true chin. No archaic human had one. Neanderthals didn't have one. Homo erectus didn't have one. The protruding bony point at the front of your lower jaw is a trait so uniquely modern human that paleoanthropologists use its presence or absence as a key marker when identifying fossil remains. When researchers find a jaw fragment with a chin, they know immediately they're looking at a modern human or one of our very recent ancestors. Why did the chin appear? This is still debated in paleoanthropology, but the leading explanations connect back to the same story of dietary change and skull restructuring. As human diets shifted with the development of tools and cooking, the massive bite forces that required thick, heavy facial bones became less necessary. The jaw began to reduce. It became more gracile, more slender. But as the bone reduced and restructured, the chin emerged, likely as a mechanical byproduct of how the forces on the jaw redistributed, or possibly as a feature that reinforced the jaw against the new stress patterns of speech and fine chewing movements. Some researchers have also proposed that the chin played a role in social signaling, potentially in mate selection, though the evidence there is more speculative. What isn't speculative is that the chin's appearance coincides directly with the emergence of anatomically modern humans, and everything that came with them. Now, here's the critical nuance. The jawline you have isn't determined by a single ancient ancestor, it's a product of layered influences, stacked on top of each other across time. Deep ancestry contributes the foundational architecture. the general proportions inherited from populations that adapted to specific geographic regions over tens of thousands of years. But local environmental pressures also shaped jaw structure in more recent history. Populations in colder climates show some evidence of broader nasal passages and slightly different facial proportions connected to air warming. Populations with persistently tough dietary staples maintained stronger jaw development longer into recent prehistory. And then there's individual development, because jaw structure isn't entirely genetic. How much you chew, how hard the foods in your diet are, even whether you breathed through your nose or mouth as a child, all of these leave measurable marks on how your jaw actually developed inside its genetic range. Your jawline is a collaboration between your ancient lineage, the environments your ancestors moved through, and the specific conditions of your own early development. It's not one story. It's 100,000 years of stories, compressed into a few inches of bone. And the next question is what those stories can actually tell you about where your family came from and what they can't. So here's where we have to be honest with you, because the internet is full of confident claims about what your jawline reveals about your heritage. Sharp jaw, Germanic ancestry. Wide jaw, East Asian roots. Weak chin, some evolutionary throwback. And almost all of it is wrong. Not slightly oversimplified, actually wrong. And understanding why matters, because the real science is far more interesting than the myth. Let's start with the core problem. No single jawline type maps cleanly onto any ancient population or species. Not one. Human populations have been mixing, migrating, splitting, and reconnecting for hundreds of thousands of years. The idea that you can look at someone's jaw angle and trace it back to a specific ancestral group treats human genetics like a sorting system where traits stay neatly separated by geography. They don't. They never have. A broader jaw shows up in populations across East Asia, West Africa, and indigenous South America. A narrower, more angular jaw appears in Northern Europe, East Africa, and parts of the Middle East. These overlaps exist because the genetic variants that influence jaw shape don't belong to any one lineage. They've traveled with humans across every continent, mixed and remixed with each new generation. And here's the layer that makes this even more complicated. Many of us carry jaw architecture that has nothing to do with our recent human ancestors at all. Between 1 and 4% of the DNA in most non-African people today comes from Neanderthals. Some populations carry contributions from Denisovans, another archaic human group. These archaic genes don't disappear. They get expressed in subtle ways across the body, including in facial structure. Researchers have found that certain Neanderthal-derived genetic variants are associated with skull and facial proportions in living people. So if your jaw has an unusual robustness to it, or your brow ridge sits in a way that seems heavier than expected, you're not imagining things. You might genuinely be expressing a fragment of archaic human DNA that has survived in your lineage for 40,000 years. But you would never know that by looking in the mirror. You would need ancient DNA analysis to find it. Your jaw doesn't come labeled with its sources. Then there are all the factors that change jaw shape completely independent of ancestry. Hormones are enormous. Testosterone drives the growth of a more angular, wider, more prominent jaw during puberty. That's why jaw shape differs so visibly between males and females on average, and why the same family can produce brothers and sisters with dramatically different facial architecture from the same genetic blueprint. Age reshapes the jaw continuously. Bone density shifts, the angle of the mandible changes, fat distribution around the jaw alters over decades. Two photographs of the same person at 20 and 60 can look like different jaw structures entirely. Diet may be the biggest wildcard. Researchers studying populations who shifted from traditional tough food diets to modern processed food diets within a single generation have found measurable differences in jaw development. Children who chew more during the critical growth window develop broader arches, stronger muscle attachment, and more pronounced jaw angles. Children eating soft modern diets develop narrower arches and more gracile jaw structure, independent of their genetic background. This means your jaw shape is partly a record of what you ate at age 7, not what your ancestors did 300 generations ago. So how do scientists actually use jaw evidence in real research? Not in isolation. Not ever in isolation, paleoanthropologists examining fossil jaw fragments look at jaw morphology alongside skull measurements, dental wear patterns, geographic context, archaeological evidence of diet, and, increasingly, ancient DNA when it's available. They build a picture from multiple sources and treat each piece of evidence as probabilistic, not definitive. Modern population geneticists mapping how human groups relate to each other use genomic data, thousands of genetic markers across the entire genome, because jaw shape alone tells you almost nothing about ancestry with any precision. This is important to say clearly because physiognomy, the claim that you can read someone's character, intelligence, ancestry, or personality from their facial features, has a long and genuinely harmful history. It was used to justify racism, to rank ethnic groups into false hierarchies, to deny people opportunities based on the shape of their nose or brow or jaw. That pseudoscience has been thoroughly and repeatedly dismantled, but versions of it keep resurfacing online dressed up in evolutionary language, presented as if skull measurements are a modern discovery rather than a discredited 19th century obsession. When you see content claiming that a particular jaw shape signals a particular ethnicity or personality trait or intelligence level, you are looking at a myth wearing scientific clothing. The actual science of jaw morphology is fascinating precisely because it resists those clean, simple narratives. Your jawline carries something real. It carries echoes of your ancestors' diets, their migrations, their adaptations, and possibly fragments of archaic human lineages that predate our species. But it carries all of those signals scrambled together in a way that no visual inspection can decode. It is one data point in a story that requires genetics, archaeology, geography, and developmental biology to even begin reading correctly. That's not a limitation of the science. That's the science telling you the truth. Your jaw is one small piece of a much larger human story, a story that belongs to all of us, that crosses every ancient border that ever existed, and that is still being written in every generation. Here's what I want from you. Have you ever made assumptions about someone's ancestry based on their facial structure, or had assumptions made about you? Drop it in the comments. And if this changed how you think about what your own face is actually telling you, subscribe. Next week, we're going into another part of your body that carries deeper evolutionary secrets than most people ever stop to consider. Health exposed. Nothing added, nothing hidden.